reading A Lot to Remember. Today is Sunday the 24th of November. Lot is an area in France which Joan Marshall Grant visited in earlier years, and this is about her journeys through Lot. She went there with Charles and Denys, and this book is dedicated to Charles and Denys, who were her husbands, with love for a lot to remember. We are now on in chapter 24, The Dancing Years. The interior of Vaillac is impressive because of the fine proportion of its great rooms, but less romantic than I had anticipated, for I had been wantonly damaged by soldiers billeted there during the war, as we saw when we visited the chateau with Gillian and David, and an obliging child from the village escorted me to the guardian of the keys. He is a most kindly man, but very difficult to find, for his farm is about 2 kilometers up a turning opposite a chapel on the road to La Bastide Murat. The chapel is marked on the map, and although Michelin ignores the track, he usually acknowledges even paths for muleteers. It is negotiable by car, providing the driver does not object to reversing to the edge of a steep drop while rounding hairpin bends, or descending backwards should he meet an ox cart. But despite these hazards, or even the effort of walking, it is worth going up there for the magnificent view of the castle, although even from the vantage point it cannot be photographed satisfactorily without a telescopic lens. About the same distance from Vaillac there is an even wider view, of much easier access, at Casagnolles, little more than the name on the map beside the sign which indicates a 360-degree panorama. Casagnolles is only 2 kilometers to the east of the N20, yet I doubt if 1 in a million of the motorists who use this great trunk road which links Paris to the Spanish border ever bother to turn off at it at Pont de Rode to refresh their spirit with a sense of freedom, the awareness of infinite space in which to grow that comes from contemplating huge vistas flowing to the full circle of their horizon. After our second visit to Vaillac, the 4 of us spent an hour at Casagnolles and then drove on towards Cahors, turning right on the N111 to dine at the Chateau de Mercule. This chateau, perched on a cliff above what is, by comparison with the rest of the lot, a mediocre reach of this lovely river, was built in the 14th century. It was besieged unsuccessfully by the English during the 100-Year War, only to be pillaged and partially destroyed by fire in 1968 during the Wars of Religion of 1568. Sorry, by fire in 1568 during the Wars of Religion. It was then restored, and because the seat of the bishops of Cahors until 1906, when it passed into private ownership. It has retained much of its essential character, although it is now a very good, sophisticated hotel. Mercule is 11 kilometers from Cahors, where the lot loops round the town and serves it as a moat, except at the north, where there is a narrow isthmus which still has some of its original fortifications. The river is now spanned by only one of the medieval bridges which made it a jewel among the cities. But the Pont Valentre, with its 3 slender towers, its 6 great Gothic arches, its diamond-shaped buttresses can still proudly maintain its right to be known as the most beautiful bridge in the world. It would have been tragedy and enough if the other 14th century bridge and the even older Vieux Pont, which had 5 towers instead of 3, had been destroyed by besiegers. But it was by an enemy within the gates, an idiocy of town councillors, that they were demolished in 1868 and 1906 and replaced by pragmatical cast iron. The Cathedral of Saint-Étienne, with its magnificent north door, and the little church of St. Urquice, which has a most tender medieval Madonna and Child in a niche above the entrance, are in the older part of the town, where some of the streets are so narrow that even at noon they are in twilight. This is on the east of the wide Boulevard Gambetta, named, as are so many streets throughout France, after the famous democratic leader who became president of the Chambre des Députés and was premier on France when he died, aged only 42. But he is honored in Cahors not only for being born here, but for its audacity of, if escaping from the siege of Paris in a balloon on an exploit of the 8th October 1870, which made headlines in the world's press, and was shared by his secretary and Monsieur Nadar, the aeronaut, who accompanied him as he soared over the Prussian lines to land safely at Montdidier. But to me, even this romantic feat was of less importance than that he was Madame Rocher's grandfather. I discovered this fact when she was showing me the furniture that had belonged to him, then stored in the attic, but now being used in the rooms of Le Tourelle at the outskirts of Tour de Fourreux, which has become her hotel instead of only an annex to the Au Bon Chose, which she sold in 1960. When Madame Rocher was satisfied that I would choose each melon, each peach individually, instead of merely asking for a kilo or a dozen, that I would prod and sniff 20 brie if necessary before selecting the one that was at its moment of maturity, she entrusted me with commissions whenever we went to Cahors. The shortest route from the marketplace to the dairy which supplied her butter is by a narrow alley behind the police station, and I must have been along it many times without noticing that it contains a restaurant. When Georges was our host there, he seemed surprised that we had not already discovered the Restaurant de la Préfecture, and said reprovingly, "Surely you know that gendarmes always eat well." Our dinner confirmed his assertions, and we were warmly greeted by several policemen who had steered us through the complicated procedure of renewing our permis de séjour, which must be done after 3 months' residence unless a visa has been obtained before arriving in France. Getting the permit would have been much less involved had we remembered to do so before it was already a month overdue, and had not become known as professional authors who were also cousins of Georges. This means that for the honor of everyone concerned, the letters of application must be impeccably written and adorned with the flowery phrases demanded when addressing a simple request in French to a chief de bureau. As we drove homewards, I was so sleepily replete that I almost protested when at Savanac, Georges announced, "Turn left here, we will visit some cousins." But Charles was wide awake, and the moment after he had carried out his instructions, Georges shouted, "Stop!" Charles would have stopped in any case, for the road had become a dance floor, walled on the right by a farmhouse, and on the left by a bandstand, made of planks laid across wine barrels and draped with tablecloths under a red and white awning, and roofed by ropes, garlanded with flowers and coloured electric light bulbs, which made the scene gay as a Christmas tree. The three bandsmen were playing vigorously, and being dazzled by a spotlight which made their brilliantine glisten and the sweat on their foreheads glitter like sequins, failed to notice Georges, until he walked purposefully towards to shake hands with the accordion player. The clarinet and the double bass also broke off in mid-bar and waited expectantly for us to be introduced. The dancers showed no sign of annoyance at the interruption, but stared at us, whispering to each other, waiting patiently for the music to start again, no doubt knowing that Georges never permits himself to be hurried. Having at last given the band permission to proceed, Georges conducted us through a gateway into a courtyard, where a pair of oxen stared drowsily at us from their stall, and then by an outsized stair, on each step a pottery jar overflowing with orange, pink or magenta geraniums, to a vine-shaded terrace which served as a spectator's gallery. After prolonged introductions and much handshaking with the village elders, who were seated at a long trestle table, we were given glasses of ratafia, which, as I disliked the taste, I drank as slowly as convention permitted, knowing that the moment my glass was empty, it would be refilled. I was wondering how to discover which of them was our host, when Charles whispered that although this was a private house, the owner sold wine, and allowed the terrace to be used as a neutral meeting place by the people of the village, this being the obligation of the most prosperous member of a community, which is too small to support even the most humble estaminet, or what is it, word? Estaminet, the most humble estaminet. I'm not sure what that word is. Charles tried to buy the next round of drinks, but was not allowed to pay for anything until about an hour later, when George accepted his suggestion that we might be allowed to show our appreciation by providing refreshment for the band. Until then, the three musicians had kept up a continuous flow of foxtrots and tangos, for when one of them paused to take a gulp from the wine bottle beside him, the other two played even louder to fill the gap. The nearest we could get to champagne for the band was 3 bottles of vin mousseux, but these were so well received by the musicians during a well-earned breather that when they started playing again, it was with a much more stimulating rhythm. Instead of feeling buffeted by the music, I started to listen. This was real dance music, but what was it? Why was it so familiar? At first, it reminded me of a sardana, and then I realized I had not heard this lilt in Catalonia, but in Scotland, where the piper was playing a reel. The woman who was sitting beside me said, "I see you enjoy the music of our Uri," It is also a dance of the Auvergne, but we have our own variations which have been danced here for many hundreds of years. She sighed. But soon no one will remember the bourrée, for the young people prefer foxtrots and refuse to learn such old-fashioned steps. And we, who know them, are too old to dance. Oh, please dance it for us, I exclaimed eagerly. She shook her head. I would be a happy thing to dance again, but I am too old. I'm a grandmother. I'm twice a grandmother, but I still dance when I feel inclined. I would so very much like to see you dance the bourrée. Already her foot was tapping the rhythm under the table. I realized she was probably younger than I, although resigned to wearing the heavy strap shoes, the thick lisle stockings, the funerary garments that constitute a peasant woman in peasant woman's Sunday black. Her eyes were gay now, and she was laughing. Alphonse, pay attention, she shouted to her husband. The English friends of George's cabossot with us wish us to dance the bourrée. Alphonse had been talking to Charles and did not seem too well pleased at the interruption. I'm too old to dance, and so are you, my old rabbit. She's not too old, I exclaimed, and neither are you. You're both only old enough to have one grandchild, and I already have two. This produced much friendly laughter, and I added, surely you are not afraid to show us the dance you have taken from our country, or have you invented new steps for our Scottish music? The bourrée is our dance, they shouted. The music is the music of Scotland, but we play it with bagpipes. But we used to have bagpipes. Now everybody joined in. We were in Scotland 2 kinds of bourrée, for 4 dances, and for 8. They were? Could there be? Oh no, this would be too extraordinary even to imagine. A dance in which a man must place his steps between the blades of 2 swords. In Scotland I have seen a sword dance so agile and so brave that he turned the swords upwards and had the blades sharpened to a razor's edge, so that he made 1 false step, his foot would be gashed open. My grandfather has danced this sword dance, cried Alphonse, but I have never seen it. I did not admit it. I had seen it only through another man's eyes, those of Robbie Grant, who was the wisest gilly on Speyside. Now talk flowed fast, as the lot flows when the high hills thaw at the end of winter. Gnarled hands thumped the table as though they sounded a dancing drum. Faces seemed to be wrinkled only by laughter, tanned not by hard endurance in the fields, but through basking under a gentle, genial sun. Yes, we will dance for you, but on one condition. You must dance for us first. When if the young mock us, we shall say, it is only in England that dancing is permitted to grandmothers. So we danced. We did. And the years fell away, as they had done when 10 years ago we found ourselves performing, also for illogical reasons, in a seedy Geneva nightclub. Then the bourrée took up its lilt again, and the 4 couples in their solemn black clothes wove the intricate patterns of the 4-some and 8-some reels. The young people watched a little resentfully, but the children clapped their hands and shouted with joy. And when we went home at 2 o'clock in the morning, grandparents were still teaching grandchildren the magic of the bourrée. So I'm making a break here because I don't want to lose the battery. Have a lovely Sunday.